My name is Rick Ferrer. I'm with eSoftware. I'm an implementer, and I've been working with the Ceres 2009 product, and that's what I'll be demoing on Dimensions today. And this is a newer database with a lot of new objects, so some of the screens may look different than what you're used to seeing. That won't make too much difference in our discussions today. So the first thing we want to talk about, what are dimensions, and then we'll talk about how they're used. In a lot of different types of software products, companies would try to analyze their data into either profit centers or cost centers, and they ended up creating a massive chart of accounts to accomplish this by creating additional accounts for every facet of the business that they wanted to analyze. So as an example, if they wanted to have departmentalized financials and they wanted to tell the difference between what was the administration department versus operations versus sales or development, it was necessary to take all of their base chart of accounts, say, for example, the telephone bill and telephone account in the general ledger, and they would need to segment it and add components to that so that they could break it out and tell how much of the telephone was for admin versus how much was for operations. Navision took a different approach on that, and they decided to do development on a concept called dimensions. Now, dimensions are very flexible and they're very powerful. They do have quite a few features that are sometimes not used or even underutilized at businesses and food banks. So first of all, so that kind of tells you what dimensions are and why they were created. Now, there are Navision in its base format has 2 global dimensions and 8 shortcut dimensions in total. You can have other dimensions beyond that. And when we talk about dimensions, we're talking about a particular attribute that you wish to track in the business, not the individual values underneath the dimension. So if I could have a dimension called department, I could have another one called branch, I could have another one called projects. And each of those can then have a number of values underneath which you'll assign to them. The difference between the global and the shortcut dimensions, the global dimensions are more prevalent and they're the easiest to do analysis on your data on. The shortcuts are a little bit more difficult to analyze on, but they're still important and they're available on most of your forms on the entry tables. The other ones, you have to actually make an effort to actually attach those. We don't typically get into many businesses that go beyond the 8 shortcut dimensions that come base with NAV. So let's talk about where we set up dimensions. I'm going to be going into the financial management section, and then I'll be looking at administration. And down here, under the dimensions section here, we have where dimensions are initially defined. Okay, so if I go in there, you can see that this database, we've got it pretty complicated. I've got a lot of different dimensions defined, and we did this on purpose because we wanted to show the ability to have complex analysis tools at our fingertips within Navision. So you see here, I do have that department that I was kind of referring to as department. And then if I want to see what the different departments that I have defined underneath that, I'll go up here to related information and pull down my dimension values. Now these are going to be all the different departments that I can use in my database. I can add to this at any time, and that's what makes one of the most powerful features of dimensions, is the ability to add dimensions without having to change the chart of accounts in any way. I just simply would click here in new, put in a new code, and this one is going to be something along the lines of agency, special events, or something like that. It really doesn't matter for our purposes, but I just want to show that it's as easy as that to now create a new dimension in our database. You don't want to delete dimensions once you've started using them. If you decide that you need to block a dimension from future use, you can simply check the blocked button on the checkbox here on the right. So for example, if I do not want anyone using the acquisitions dimension anymore, I can simply just go over and check that box. Now that won't remove any of the analysis data that we've used on that dimension in the past, but it will prevent any future postings from going against that particular dimension. So essentially we locked it down and made that dimension unusable for future postings without changing any of the underlying data. Okay. Now, a lot of people are familiar that in the chart of accounts that you're able to do subgroupings. This is a very normal type of approach where you can have groupings like this where we have assets, current assets, and cash, and then they have some totals here, and then you have a total cash. But this begin total and end total structure is very familiar to a lot of people in the chart of accounts where we can get subtotals throughout the chart of accounts. Now the same thing can actually be done in dimensions, and that's another feature that's kind of underutilized. If I go back down to where my dimension structure, and I've done an illustration of this under my area, so what I've basically done is I've taken the area, I've taken all the states of the United States and I've actually created them as values of dimensions with beginning and end totals. Okay. Now what this is going to allow me to do is as I record any transaction up against this dimension MA01, not only will it be associated with the MA01 dimension New York, but it'll also filter in to my totals here of Mid-Atlantic states. And then so because they have my begin total here on Mid-Atlantic and my end total, and I'm totaling between MA00 all the way up to 99, anything that I post to these particular transactions and to these different dimension values will also total into my total for Mid-Atlantic states. And then I've got my Midwest with those states and a Midwest total, and you see how it's indented. So this can be also a powerful feature when I'm doing analysis on this. If I wanted to see in particular what was the transactions that dealt with maybe agencies in the state of Nebraska or customers, if I was doing a nonprofit, I would look at the MW03 entry. But if I was interested in just seeing what the total was in the entire Midwest, I could analyze it just based on the MW99 dimension value, and I would be able to see the total of the entire Midwest. Okay. Now it does take a little bit of planning when you're setting up dimensions in this fashion, because you want it to be aligned very, very nicely so that you can put a beginning and end total and kind of wrap them around the entries in the middle. So I just use a simple coding of MW for Midwest, and then 00 is my heading for the beginning and 99 is my total, and I've given each of the states just a 01 through however many states there were, and then it continues here with New England and then the South, and then finally the West. So that's an example of being able to indent the dimension values as well. Now there's no requirement that you can do this. You could use it simply just by listing them. You're also able to do nested dimension values. So I can go more than one level. So what I've done here is I've created a heading of development, and then I've created another heading or beginning total of just direct mail programs, and then underneath that I put 3 different direct mail events or development codes, and then I have a total for my direct mail campaigns. Then I've started another one for events and then event total. So I can see with this kind of structure, if I want to see everything that was in the golf tournament, I would be looking at this particular dimension here, DVE V01. If I want to know my total for all events, I would be looking at the DVE 99. But if I was interested in development as a total, and I didn't care whether it was a food drive, an event, or a direct mail program, I would be looking at the DVZZ99 dimension value when I'm doing my analysis, and that would give me the total of everything that was in this dimension value. So is there any questions about the dimensions or the dimension values and how they're set up? And then, of course, the department one shows you the illustration with no subtotaling. It's just straight dimension values, top to bottom. No subtotaling here, no beginning end totals or anything like that. So I would have to look at all of these individually or without a dimension per department at all. Okay, so the next thing is, once you've defined these dimensions, how do you tell Navision how to use them? Well, that's actually done in the general ledger setup. Now, typically you want to set up dimensions at the time that you install the system. It's not something that you normally want to change after you've been doing business for years, although it is possible to change the dimensions at any time. It's just that because it'll have to go and recalculate a bunch of transactions, you need to set aside some time to do that, and we would always recommend that you contacted us first before you undertake something like that. Now, I talked about the 8 shortcut dimensions and 2 globals. In those 2 global dimensions here, I've defined mine to be department and project, and you'll also notice that those take over the first 2 slots of the shortcuts. Now I have from shortcut 3 to 8 to use as I see fit. So I've set up GL branch, grant, my area, and my development as additional shortcut dimensions, and then we have 2 called SD7 and 8 as number 7 and 8 as placeholders right now. I'm not really using those in this database. And you can leave these blank. You do not need to put these in here. We were testing something with a lot of dimensions, and that's why we put these in here. But you do not need to define these all up. These can all be left blank. Okay. You don't necessarily just want to come in and switch these around at any time, though. Although it's possible, I would again recommend that you contact us and let us know what you're trying to accomplish. Once you've done this, you start using the software, you'll start seeing dimensions being used and being available to you. So let's talk about what the difference between global and shortcut dimensions are. If I'm entering a new purchase invoice, the on the invoicing tab, you'll notice that the department code and the project code are appearing here. That's because these 2 are my global dimensions. So they are going to appear on the actual form as available fields for me to fill in. So if I was entering a new purchase order, let me just go because we're not really interested in seeing a lot of entry. We're more interested in dimensions here. But as I'm entering a new purchase order, purchase invoice, if I go ahead and specify on the header of the document a department and project, as I enter lines onto this invoice, those dimensions will naturally be defaulted down onto my lines when I get there, if they're actually shown. So I need to show them. I'm just going to grab my department code and my project code. And to illustrate shortcut dimensions, I'm going to add an area and a development code as well. Okay. The reason why I'm adding those is I want to show that those are not on my invoicing tab. There's no area, there's no development. Only the 2 globals are going to show up here. But on lines, as I enter it, in addition to the 2 globals, which, by the way, have defaulted. So you can see that 1000 here has populated automatically into my department code here, and Joplin has come into my project code. I can also now on the line specify an area, dimension, and then also a development code on each one. And again, this might be MAO2 because it's still Pennsylvania, but I might want to charging this off to a different development code. So the difference between the globals, the globals are going to show up on the header of the document that you're on, will default automatically to the lines. Shortcut dimensions 3 to 8 are going to be available on the line for you to enter. Now, if I was using yet another dimension beyond the globals, I remember I said there was also other, so if I had more than 8 dimensions, which quite frankly is quite a lot of dimensions to be using in one database, but I could get to those additional dimensions through related information. So if I had a 9th dimension set up here, I could go to related information, invoice, and dimensions to change on this invoice and attach yet another dimension as well. So for example, if I just wanted to pick a grant dimension on this invoice, I can do that. So you're also able to get at the dimensions from related information for the header, and then also if it's for the line, you can go down with the lightning bolt here and then line, and I can get to the line dimensions as well. So you see now how this has picked up all those dimensions, and if I needed to, I could assign yet another dimension here at the line level. So what does this all do for me, and what's that going to do in the end? So why are we doing all of this? Okay, the reason we're doing this is because every financial transaction that's now generated from that purchase invoice when it posts will be tagged with those attributes. So the information that flows into my general ledger is going to be, not only is the amount going to hit the chart of account that I hit with the posting, it's also going to be tagged with all those different attributes. It's going to have a department, a project, a grant, and whatever else I put on that entry. And what that's going to do for me is allow me to do analysis later on and planning on how to analyze my business and make decisions based on that. If I go over to the chart of accounts now, I want to talk about dimensions here as well. Before we do talk about the analysis of that, I do want to show you how you can control some of the dimensions. One of the things that you can do, for example, is on any chart of account, you can specify what dimensions are required. So, for example, when we do vehicle maintenance, okay, so I have my vehicle maintenance account here. I can come up and do related information, account, and dimensions, and I'll just go to dimension single because I'm only dealing with a single account. I'll show you how multiples work in a few minutes. Okay, so you can see that there is nothing actually specified, even though these are here. There's nothing going on. There's no dimension value code and there's no value posting. Well, there's two things that I can do. I can specify a default dimension value code so that anytime I use this account, it'll pick up a default dimension. So for example, if my vehicle maintenance was always a facilities management or an operations, let's go operations department, I can specify that the default dimension will be 4,000. So any transactions posted to 57,000 will automatically default to dimension 4,000. But with this setup as I have it right now, it's only a default, meaning it's going to come in, it's going to be populated for me automatically, but I can override it and change it to anything I want. Now, if that's your desired behavior, that's all you need to do here. But this value posting is, again, one of the benefits of using dimensions in Ceres or in NAV is that I can specify some rules that I want to be enforced when I'm using this particular account, 570000 vehicle maintenance. And those rules are, I can leave it blank, which means basically no rule. You can put whatever you want here for the dimension. I can put code mandatory. Okay. Now with this setup right now, it's going to default to 40,000, but it'll let me change it to any other department, but it's going to force me to put some department in. It will not let me post without a department dimension. I could not put a blank in, for example, and wipe out the 40,000. I can put same code. That's much more restrictive. That means now when I post to this account 570000, I must select department 4000. It will not let me post with a different department other than 4000. And then the last one is, you wouldn't put a default dimension over here, but let's say, for example, I'll do it on this one. I will go down and say no code. Okay, now what I've said with that one is probably the most rarely used one. What that means is that when I post to this account, I am not going to allow you to specify a GL branch code, because it's saying when the GL branch on this has to be blank. Okay? So those are the three options you have. Code mandatory means you will have to put something in before you can post. Same code will have to have something here because it's saying it must be the same as whatever I've got in my dimension value code. And the last one is no code, meaning you have to leave it blank. You're not allowed to post anything in there. Now you have to be careful sometimes with these no codes because you can get into posting issues where you have defaults coming in. You have to kind of delete them before you can actually post the transaction. So you want to be very careful how you do this. The most common ones are along the lines of code mandatory. And when you're doing code mandatory, by the way, you do not need to put a default one in. You can just say that the code is mandatory for department. I'll have to put something in, but Navision's not going to care what department I use on that transaction. Is there any questions so far? Okay, so let's talk about, once we've got our dimensions coded, can we get NAV to do some of the work? Because if I go through all my chart of accounts, and let me show you an example of the multiples. Let's say all of these utilities right here, I want to make sure that they put a department on them, but I don't really care which department they use. Well, in here I can highlight all three, and I go up to related information, account, dimensions, and now I can do multiple. And now I can just go code and pick the default code of 4000. They must have something on them. It's not letting me do them individually. If you have different values in the different ones, let me go ahead and delete these off of here. And then I'll go ahead and create them all at one time. I'm thinking one of these has something associated with it that I don't want, although they all look to be clean. Now I'm going to try to assign the multiple ones. I'll go new, I'll select department, and I'll say code mandatory, and then I'll hit OK. Now what it did is on all three of these, it added department code mandatory for me. So you can see if you decided you wanted that on every one of your accounts, you could do it as quickly as that just by highlighting the first account and the last one on your list and doing related information, dimensions, multiple, and then you can assign them all at the same time. Okay? So now that we've done that, we've got our dimensions set up, we've gone to the chart of accounts, and we've actually specified all these code mandatories. Well, you can see very quickly as you start to post transactions that you could get into a situation where your users will be entering transactions and they're going to be stopped from posting if they don't fill in all these valid dimensions. One of the ways of helping that, some cases that's exactly what you want to happen. You want it to stop and say, hey, you need to put a department dimension on that. What's it going to be? There's other cases where you want the system, for the purposes of speed of entry and for accuracy, to assign the dimensions automatically. So one of the things that we can do is we can assign dimensions, default dimensions, to some of the entities that are within Navision. For example, agencies, vendors, items, and donors, as just 4 examples. So if I wanted to go to my agencies, so I'll pop over to agency relations, and let's say that each time we have any kind of fees that are associated with a distribution to an agency, I want that agency fee to go into my revenue accounts, and I want it tagged with a dimension of operations for the department. Okay, so what I will do is I've got my agency here. I would go up onto related information and go down to dimensions, and I would specify department, and then I would pick my operations one, and I don't really need to fill this in because it's going to be a default value. So now anytime that I use this agency B0129 in a transaction, it will be automatically defaulted to dimension code 4000 for operations. Okay, and let's say that they're also associated with a particular project. And again, I'm just doing examples, so don't necessarily use a lot of, don't read too much into what I'm demoing. But I'm just going to say they're associated with this Kids Cafe program. Okay, so both of these dimensions are going to be defaulted to any transactions that I do for this agency. Okay, so now I can go and just start entering an agency order. And I don't think I have any non-food banks on the call, but even if this was a for-profit situation, it would simply just be entering a customer order, a sales order. And if I call up my B0129, and I go down to my invoicing tab, which should have my dimensions, you'll notice that it automatically defaulted to department 4000 and my project code of Kids Cafe. So that saves my person entering, because we know we're going to need these to post this transaction because I've set up my GL account to require it. So this is going to save them a lot of keystrokes. They don't have to come each time here and remember to do this. And of course, because it's on the header section, it'll also default to any lines that I was to enter for this agency. And get rid of some of these tabs here so we can see a little bit more of the lines. And I'll just illustrate that with a quick GL account instead of go over and put in a quantity and an amount. And hopefully my department and project are on the line. If they're not, I will go show them to illustrate that it did, in fact, populate down at the line item level as well. So that's how default dimensions will come into play. Now you're allowed to assign them on the agency, as you saw, I saw me do, and I can also do it on the vendor level. So any vendor I have, I can also go ahead by going to related information, vendor, and dimensions. I can do the same thing. I can say when I'm dealing with this particular vendor, this is equipment leasing, so maybe I want that to be under facilities or something along those lines. So that's how you would assign a default dimension to the vendor. And then there's one more I want to talk about real quick, because then I'm going to talk about conflicts, okay? You can also assign dimensions at the item level. So this is a CSFP item, and I'll go ahead and I guess I can't assign dimensions at this level, so I will call up the item first and now assign the dimension here. And I'm going to specify a different dimension than 4,000, because let's just say that this is CSFP and it's got to do with distribution of KDC, something along those lines. So I'm specifying a different department here of 4,000. Well, you can see that I could potentially have a conflict right now. I've got a department on this item of 4308, and I've got a department on my agency of 4,000. Well, NAV is not going to post this transaction. If I was to use this item with the agency that I had shown in a few minutes ago, it's not going to post the transaction with both dimensions, 4,000 and 4308. One is going to win out. And what you want to do is not let Navision make these kinds of decisions for you. So the way to prevent Navision from making its choice, and we could post a transaction and figure out which one it defaults to. My guess is it's going to take the item one over the agency one, because that's going to be on the line level. But if I wanted to force it and say which one is supposed to win out when that transaction posts, that's something called dimension priorities. This is getting a little complicated for a lot of places, and this is something you typically want to discuss with your implementer to decide these kinds of. So we're giving it a tiebreaker and saying if you get a dimension from one entity that's X and you get a dimension from another entity that's Y, and they conflict, well, which one wins out? Does agency win out over item, or does item win out over agency? And the way you do that is through what we call default dimension priorities. So I'm going to go here, and I've actually already set it up. I've said that if both in a sales transaction, which is an agency order distribution, if I have a dimension on the agency and on the item and they conflict, then I want you to use the agency as priority 1 and then the item as priority 2. So in other words, the agency will override the item. Now, if I really wanted to change that, I could do it the other way around and say that item is number 1 and agency is number 2, and now it'll result in favoring the item's dimension over the agency when the two conflict. Is there any questions on that? Okay. So the next thing we want to talk about is dimension combinations. So we've already seen how you can specify default dimensions. You can require them to be on the chart of accounts so that transactions must post. Oh, I have a question that was in the chat box here. How about the header level from Sonia? Can you explain what you're asking for, the sales header?
Yeah, so would that be, when you do a dimension priority, would that change on the header level too, or only on the line? It should be the same dimension, so it would change on both the levels, on the header level and the line level too. Yeah.
That's a good question. You're asking, I think, because in an agency order, it's going to post a revenue to an accounts receivable account, and it's also going to post revenue to a revenue account from the line, but it's also going to post to accounts receivable. And the answer is in the accounts receivable, the header section, it's going to post with the agency's dimension. So you will actually have two different dimensions posting on that transaction. I think, let me go back into the agency order. So let's say that the fees on this particular order, I can go do statistics and find out if there are any. Well, there's no fees, but let's go ahead and let's say that the fees on this entire order is $50, okay? Now, my header dimension is going to be, say, Department 4000, and if I was doing that particular item, the line dimension was going to go to 4308. So what would actually happen is when I post to accounts receivable, the debit for $50, it will be tied to this transaction. But the line, the revenue account, will hit 4308. So in this particular case, it would hit two different dimensions. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yes, yeah, it's nice. Thank you.
Okay. And that's perfectly fine. There's not a problem. Dimensions don't need to necessarily be in balance. But I should also point out that most of the times when the people are doing analysis by dimensions, it's typically in the income and expense sections of their chart of accounts and not so much in the balance sheet. But that's not a rule, but it is more normal because it's kind of thought of as profit centers. So I'm not sure that the dimension on the accounts receivable account is going to be all that meaningful to them. Okay. But one of the very common things that happens when people start using dimensions is at the end of the month, the accounting folks spend a lot of time doing reclassifications because of misentered entries into their dimension values. For example, they used a particular project that should never be used with that department. Well, you can actually make great strides in preventing erroneous entries by setting up what we call dimension combinations. Now, dimension combinations is where you will specify, again, another set of rules that will prevent erroneous postings. So again, I'm going to go back to my dimension section here, and I'm going to pick on this one here called dimension combinations. Now, under dimension combinations, the first screen I'm presented with is the dimensions going down on the lines and the dimensions going across on the columns. Now, what I can do at this level is I can totally block a particular combination. For example, if I never wanted to use the grant dimension with the development dimension in the same transaction, I'm just saying that that's just an illegal combination. No transaction should you be posting with both a development and a grant dimension. At the same time, I can simply right-click here and go to Assist Edit, and then I'll select Blocked and hit OK. And now I've essentially have prevented anybody in the future from posting any transaction where they specify both the grant dimension and the development dimension at the same time. Now that's very restrictive, and I may need to do it at that level in some cases. But what is more normal is a limited block. So what I've done under department here in this column, and where it intersects with project right here, I've right-clicked and hit Assist Edit and selected Limited, which basically says I'm going to allow this to happen, but I have some limitations on what's allowed. So I will now right-click again, and instead of hitting Assist Edit, I will go to Drill Down, and what that's going to do is now going to present me with a list of all my projects going down this way on the lines, and going across the columns, I've got all the different departments that are available to me. Okay, so I just pick whatever combination is not valid, and I'll block those. Now these numbers are not that meaningful to me, so I'm going to click Show me the column names, please. So now this will turn my non-descriptive numbers into something a little bit more meaningful. So as an example now, we'll say that, for example, I should never have give lunch program with an administration program. A give lunch project with an administration department, excuse me. So I will right-click under that combination, hit Assist Edit, and then block it. Okay, and let's just say high school pantry is another one that I want blocked. I'll just continue to go ahead and block these, and I could continue doing that. And all you got to really do is just double-click on the ones that you want to block. And let's just say that admin KDC is also blocked for that. So, I mean, this can be tedious, but again, it's one-time setup that pays off handsomely at the end of each month when I don't have any of these invalid combinations posted to my general ledger that I need to spend time reclassifying. And if I decide to open that up, for example, we decide that this one is now okay, I can come back at any point and just reopen that combination back up. It removes the word blocked right here, and now I can now use that combination again. Any questions on this particular feature of blocking invalid combinations? Okay, so far we've talked about all the things to set it up and preventing it. Now we're actually getting into see where you can actually use these dimensions. The first place that's most common is actually right in the chart of accounts. You'll notice that I'm going to get rid of a couple of columns here just to make this just a little bit easier to read and stuff I do not need to see. Okay, so when I go into my chart of accounts and look at this, you'll see that my net change amount here is actually the same as my balance over here. So what I want to do is use the feature called Set Limits, or Limit To. So I'm going to go ahead and go under this Chart of Accounts button here, and I'm going to select the Limit Totals. When I do that, I can now add filters here, and these are not filters in the same sense of traditional filters within Ceres. We know that traditional filters here in Ceres, for example, I wanted to say I want to see accounts 566500 through 569800. That's going to actually limit the data that I see in terms of which rows. Limits work a different way. Limits are going to change the numeric data in this screen based on whatever I'm limiting it to. So when I pull down the limit add filter, I've got lots of choices. I can either add a date filter, or I can actually use, as you see, my two global dimensions I here, department and project. So let's first go ahead and click the department, and then I'll go ahead and select department 1000 for administration, and then I'll hit enter, and now you'll notice that immediately all of these numbers have changed. These were all much higher. I'll go ahead and release the filter, and you'll see that. So if I drill down now on this vehicle fuel expense here, you can see that all these transactions that are in here, and if we show the department, if it's not already here, I'm not sure why we don't have, you'll be happy to know in Series 4 we've gone ahead and changed all these screens to have the most used fields available on them by default, so you don't have to do this. But what I'm showing you is you see the department here is 4840 on a bunch of different transactions. So now I'll go ahead and reapply my filter by department, and you'll see that that vehicle expense is going to probably go to 0 because there were no transactions posted in vehicle expense with department 1000. And if I drill down on this vehicle maintenance, you'll see that that transaction does in fact have a posting to department 1000. So I'm actually able to see very quickly financials by department here. If I change this to another department, let's just go with 000, again my numbers will change, and if I look at the drill down, you'll see all the transactions, in this case only one, are reflective of that particular department. You can also, I'm not sure if I have any projects in here. Let's go ahead and do this and get rid of department, and let's add a project filter. Let's see if we can find some numbers for the Circle of Hope. Okay, not too many, but there's a 5,000 rental here, and this is going to be a good example, by the way, because we actually have the chance here to see both department and project at the same time. You'll notice that these transactions here all have project code Circle Hope, but they have different departments. Well, you can add additional ones. So if I was to say, yes, I want to see Circle Hope project, but only when the department was 4,000 rather, and hit enter, now I've got basically a double filter going on. I'm seeing only transactions that were posted in department Circle Hope, but also in department 4000. And if I drill down, it'll actually confirm that with the transactions that are now posted. I can see only department 4000 and only project Circle Hope. Don't know why it keeps on jumping on me. I've got something on my keyboard going, but it's over here on this Circle Hope. So that's analysis that you can do without running any kind of reports. You can just sit here all day long in the general chart of accounts and put these types of transactions in here. You can also filter by date. So right now, that's this net change here is all what the balance is. But if I wanted to see for a particular month, let me see if this particular drill down has some different months. Okay, so I'll look at the month of August of 2013. So if I add a date filter of August 13 as well, we're going to watch this occupancy, and it should jump down from 22,000 to something less than that, and it went down to 1785, and if I drill down on that, you'll see now that it's only transactions that occurred in the month of August of 2013 in department 4000. So you can layer these filters on as deep or as you need to really drive down into that analysis. Another way, before I move on, is there any questions on how to use Limit 2 here? Okay, so we'll go ahead and clear these off. We'll get back. One of the things you can actually do here, so this is great. I could do this departments one at a time and say, hey, what did department 000 do? Okay, that's cool. What did Department 1000 do? Oh, I did that. But what did Department 00 do again side by side is the next question that comes up. And can I see that? And the answer is, of course, you can. You do balance by dimension. All right? So what I'm going to say is I want to see my GL accounts, and I want to change the show columns to be my departments. I'll go ahead and hit OK, and I'll clear this because I don't really care about the date period. I'm only interested in my GL accounts, and I want to see my departments. And now I'll go ahead and hit the show matrix. And now I've got this cool matrix form where I'll go down to my expenses a little bit further down, where you can now see any of the accounts. Trying to find something that's got some money in a couple of different buckets. Here's an example. So I have grants. The total is this amount here. 897510 was posted against Department 000. I've got this amount against Department 1000, and if I scroll over to the right, there may actually be more over here. This is difficult to read, so sometimes what you want to do is choose columns and throw a little freeze frame in there so that you can, of course I'll have to come back in there and do that again under the show matrix, and I think it'll stay at that point. Yeah, it will. So now as I scroll across, I can actually see my total is here, but I'm seeing all the different department breakdowns going across. And then of course with the advent of 2009, I could just drop that over into Excel if I needed to see it and do some more analysis at that point. So now, I don't know if I have mix. Yeah, there it is. So now if I needed to do some what ifs and projections or whatever, or present to someone a departmentalized breakdown of all the expenses in the company for a period, I've done it without doing a whole lot of work. I can tell them exactly how every expense in the company was departmentalized over any period of time that I want to do that. And I haven't even used a piece of paper yet. Then if I wanted to, I could change this and say, okay, what about projects? Same thing, just change the column and say I want to see my columns now as projects instead. And hit show matrix. And the same thing, now I'm seeing my projects going across. Now one of the really cool things that you can do, let me do that again. Let me see if I got an account that actually has some activity. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's not really, doesn't make that much sense, but I'm going to pick on this particular account, 100,000, because it had some breakdowns in terms of projects. It also had breakdowns in terms of departments. So I'm just going to try this and see if I can get it to work. I'm going to go ahead and filter for account number 1000. And now I'm going to do a little bit of a difference. I'm going to say I want to see the lines as departments. I'm doing an analysis now on one account where I want to see the breakdown by department and project at the same time. When I do this, going down here, I'm going to have my different departments, and going across, I see projects. So in that particular account, for whatever time period I defined, I can see that in Department 1000 Administration, there was a total of 11,455 was posted to Department 1000, and 2,500 of that was also associated with the Project High School. And the same thing here, my total is 9847, but there was 10,000 posted against the Circle Hope. Now on this particular data set, these don't really mean a whole lot. I mean, this would be much more valuable in expenses, but I think you can see how powerful this would be when you're looking for problems, for example, and you're actually able to drill down. So let's just say that that doesn't look right. We should probably not have this money posted to administration in high school. Well, I can drill down and see what transaction caused that. And if I needed to, from there, I can just go ahead and navigate down to, the actual transaction that was posted that caused this to happen. In this case, it was just a general journal entry. So I really can't blame anyone else except myself for posting it that way. But the fact is, I can go and find out that, yes, we did in fact put in a transaction to that account with that department and project. But what I'd like you to draw from this is the ability to see your expenses, for example. So if you're looking at, let's just say office supplies, you may have 3 departments. You got your administration, your development, and your warehouse, or I don't want to say office supplies, but supplies in general. And then if it was associated with different projects, you could see those as well. Is there any questions on how to use the GL balance by dimensions? And I could flip this around too. If I wanted to go the other way, I could certainly say, show me projects going down and show me departments going across. Whatever one makes sense to me. It'll just allow me to just flip it around there. Now I got my projects going down and my departments going across the top.
Hi, Rick.
Yes.
Can you do department in a row and accounts in across?
Department on the lines and accounts going across?
Yes.
Yes, you can. You probably wouldn't be filtering for that, but yes, you can. I got my departments going down, my GL accounts going across.
Okay, thank you.
Now, there's going to be some limitations as to the number of columns we can fit here. So you want to, this is probably not going to work for you unless you're only doing like a small range of accounts. Okay. So if I was doing, for example, just my revenue accounts, that might work, because otherwise I'm going to run out of columns. It only can show in the matrix form so many columns, and then it bugs out on you and says, I'm not doing it no more. It's too much work. So, yeah, if you have a lot of columns going across, you're going to want to go ahead and filter that as well.
Okay.
But it is certainly doable. Okay. So one of the other things that we run into is dimensions. After you set them up, we've seen a lot of this, all this analysis that I've been doing here. If you notice, there's one limitation, correct? That these are not showing me all of those other dimensions that I had set up, like area and development, and it only has basically my 2 global dimensions. These other ones, business unit, date, and branch, and all that, and fund, those are all built-in filters. Those are not set up for dimensions that are flexible. Those are going to be there all the time. The only 2 that are showing up in this list are my 2 global dimensions, department and project. All right? So now I'm kind of in trouble because I want to know, for example, one of the other dimensions. What did I do for my area or my development expenses and things like that? Can I accomplish that? And the answer is not on this particular screen, but it can be done. And it's done through what we call analysis by dimensions, okay? Now this gets into an area, again, that it's a little bit more complicated than the very base setup, but it's not anything that can't be done and set up. And again, it's a little bit of work up front, but again, it will pay dividends in the back on the back end. So what they call this is analysis views, okay? And you can set up as many of these as you need to. So you'll notice that I have one here, but I'm actually going to set up a new one because this one kind of duplicates what the global dimensions is already doing, department and project. I need one that has not only department and project, but also my area of business and my development code. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new one, and I'm just going to set it up and say it's, my analysis view, AV, okay? And I'm going to say that it includes department, project, area, and development. Okay, now here I can put a GL filter in. Remember I said in the beginning, dimensions, a lot of times you're really looking at your income and your expenses. A lot of times you don't spend a ton of time looking at your assets, liabilities, and equities. That's not a requirement, but if I want to keep this analysis view running lean and clean, I can specify that, hey, I'm never going to be looking at those other accounts, so why clutter up my analysis view with all that data? I can simply say that my revenues begin at, say, 40,000 or 400,000 rather. Actually, it starts here, but we'll go from there. And I can say that that goes all the way up through the last of my expenses, which is all sixes there, all nines rather. And then this date compression is another way of conserving space, if you will, within the view. So the options are no compression, which is none, day, week, month, quarter, year, and period, okay? If I'm going to be doing drilling down into the transactions to see what caused a particular transaction or a particular amount to occur, what transactions were responsible for that, I don't really want to put a lot of compression on. In fact, I would typically recommend none. But that means that for every transaction that Ceres writes or NAV writes to the General Ledger Chart of Accounts, it has to make another entry somewhere else in the analysis view table. So you can see quickly that I'm, in a sense, duplicating some data in my database. But I'm actually creating kind of an analysis cube, if you will. Not to get too technical, but I think a lot of us are familiar with the terminology of business intelligence and analytics that basically says I just need to build this cube of data that I want to slice and dice and pull my information out. Well, if I'm going to not only just want to see it in totals for reporting purposes, I might allow it to use compression. So if I'm only just going to run financials every month on this, but I don't really get into the case of drilling down, I could use compression. But if I'm going to try to do analysis and figure out problems, I would probably go with date compression of none. And then the next thing is the starting date. So again, if I'm only looking at the current fiscal year, for example, which in my case started on July 1st, I'll put that in there. And this next field that I'm going to talk about right here, update on posting, that's the crucial one. Okay? If I check this box, and I will, that means that every time a transaction is posted to the General Ledger, if it falls into this starting date range and this account filter range, it's also going to write a duplicate entry over in this analysis view. So if I had 10 of these views created, that means that instead of writing one transaction in the General Ledger for that particular transaction, it's going to have to write 11, the original plus these 10 views. So we don't recommend that you set up a ton of these views that you're not really using. There is an option here to not update on posting, and then at the end of the month you could come in and hit this update button and it would actually go through the process of building it. But you have to know that that's going to take some time, because now it's going to go through all of the general ledger transactions that occurred from July 1st on in this date, in this account number range, and it's actually going to build my cube on the fly. My recommendation, probably you want to just do update on posting, take the hit up front, because otherwise you'll spend a lot of time waiting at the end of the month for this to build when you're ready to use it. Okay, but there are cases where it makes sense. I just recommend that you talk it over with your team and your implementer as to what's going to work for you. Whether you want or not you want to include budgets in here, you can check that box as well. So if you're going to do any comparison to budgets, you'll need to have that checked. Okay, and then blocked you wouldn't do. That's just if you had one in the past, you didn't really want to delete it, but you don't want to use it anymore, you could go ahead and block it. But we'll leave this one unblocked. Now, here's where the real benefit of analysis views. Remember, I only have two global dimensions, departments and project, and I need my area and development, and I know that I couldn't see those numbers in the general ledger because they only had globals of department and project. So in here, I'm going to go again because I still might want to see it by department and by project, so I'll include them. But over here, I get to include two other dimensions beyond those. And I could have actually excluded department and project and included four others. So I'm going to pick my area dimension as my third one and my development as my fourth one. Now, in this particular database, there's not a ton of transactions. So I'm going to go ahead and hit update here, and I'll sit here while it actually goes through all the different transactions. And you can see that it went very quickly. That's because there's probably only about 2,000 or 3,000 transactions in this database. But if you've been using it for years, we could have been spending a few hours here at this point. Okay, now I've created my view. What can I do with it? Well, okay, I can go ahead and edit my analysis view, and now I've got the same options as I had before. I can be showing lines as a GL account, but now very coolly I get to pick from area and development where they weren't there before. When I did it for my account, those weren't options. So now I can actually go ahead and do this if I want to. And you'll notice it already defaults to my account number range because that's the ones that were in there. And then I could just get rid of my date filter. Now I'm going to let you know right away this is not going to actually show anything because I only created this dimension this morning and I haven't actually posted any transactions against it. But I'll go ahead and do the show matrix. But you can now see where this would have worked quite well if I was posting transactions. In fact, I'll go put an entry in against, say, this account right here into one of these dimensions. If you just bear with me, just so that we can actually see that that updates on posting, because that's what I did. I said I want to do it on posting. So we'll go ahead and post it today. Put it in that account, and we'll just put minus $52, and I'm going to go, and I need to show my development code. I'm going to move that up so we can get it somewhere near the top where we can see it. So I'll pick one development code. I'll just say, okay, food for families. And then I'll come down and I'll post into Turkey Day account development, and then I'll just offset this with we'll just say that this went into the bank, so I'll pick a bank account. This side I don't really care about what, I just need to balance this entry, $492, go ahead and post. And if I don't have any other requirements on me, now we can go back to my analysis by dimension, edit, and I want to get rid of this because I posted it, although I probably posted it today. But there we go. We can see it right there. There's my 4,000 account. I'm sorry, 401 account. Got hit with $52 for food for families. And and 402 got hit for $440. Now here's an example of that totaling aspect that I was referring to. You see that for the total for the account support there's 52 for food for families and 440 for the direct mail Turkey Day program, and you can see that my direct mail total is nicely filling in at $492. So that's an example of those nested dimensions that I talked about way back in the beginning of this webinar, showing us that it actually does the totaling for me, so I don't have to do the math in my head to figure out what this column plus this column plus this column equals. I've got the total right there. Any questions on this analysis by dimension so far?
Rick, I have a question. Maybe it's not related to analysis by dimensions. Why does, like, sometimes when we do suggest payment lines on the payment journal, why does the dimension doesn't come over the global dimensions?
When you're doing what on what line? I'm sorry.
When we do suggest payment vendor lines on the payment journal, sometimes the default dimension doesn't come over the payment line.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one exactly what's going on. I have seen that in the past. I've seen it where it comes in and it causes problems, though, because it makes you balance the dimension. But I don't know. That's really not related. I think we'll probably need to look at that and figure out. But I do recall there being an issue with suggest payments where occasionally dimensions act a little bit funny. Either bringing it in when you don't want it to come in or leaving it out when you need it to be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Okay. Thank you.
I think we're all experiencing that sometimes. I think it's a very common issue that I think we have it in our list of open issues to address, so hopefully it'll be addressed soon.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, so analysis by dimensions, you can set up as many of these as you need to, so if you want another one with 4 different dimensions, go at it, you can set them up. Again, the key is if you're going to have a lot of these, you have to be prepared. If you put update on posting, then you're going to take a slight performance hit because it's going to, if a particular distribution entry would normally make 40 entries into the general ledger, in this case I have 2 different ones being updated on posting, it's going to make, in a sense, 120 entries. A tremendous impact? No, but you need to be aware of it, and you've got to be getting. You have to weigh the benefits of your analysis with the performance impact and decide which way is better for you. We do have a couple of clients that actually do not update them on update. On posting. They update them at the end of the month by manually clicking this button and building it. But also, usually the ones that are doing that a lot of times will also have the compression on to the month because at that point they don't care. They're just looking to run some financials. So they'll go ahead and put compression on to monthly. And I probably should have shown this too. I don't know if I did or not. But from the matrix, you are able to now, when you see this, actually drill down to the transactions that caused that. And then, of course, well, this is just a GL entry anyways, but you can drill down and see the transactions that caused, was responsible for this dollar amount. Okay. Believe it or not, we're almost down to the end. The last thing I think I want to talk about, then open it up for questions, is account schedules. You know that when you do account schedules, you see that you get these department and project filters, and these other 2 are always grayed out. Okay, so you know you get your globals, but hey, if I wanted to run, say, the income statement, wouldn't it be nice if I could run my income statement by development or by area or whatever so that I can see those amounts? Well, right now, I can only have the two global dimensions available to me, okay? So when I go ahead and run this, essentially, we put something in, hopefully a little bit more meaningful. Try to get something with some numbers in there. Yeah, okay. It's always nicer when at least something comes up on the numbers. But we know that when we run that, we can go ahead and filter and run it for a particular department. So I can say, okay, let me just do administration, and now I can actually run the income statement by Department 1000 as it says here. And this is just a note on filtering as well. You also know that you can combine these departments just by, so in other words, if I wanted administration and admin KC, I could do that a couple of different ways. I could have just gone in 1000 to 1008, and then I can also say, but I also need 44,000 in there. So you can filter with these department filters or anything like that and kind of combine unusual combinations that you may not have seen coming. So if someone says, listen, I want to know all my departments except for admin, so just basically give me everything else, or if they want to combine warehouse with development for some reason, you can do that. But anyways, you'll know, you notice that, of course, that these are always grayed out. Well, that's because they're running off of the chart of accounts GL entries, which only have those two dimensions. If I wanted to actually run this account schedule with those other dimensions, I can go into the account schedule here, and now I can specify that I want my account schedule income statement to run off of my analysis view instead of off of the off of the default GL entries, which is what the blank would do. So now when I do that, and it's all set because that's already built. I did it on posting. It's updated. Now when I go in and run this, you'll notice right away that I have not only my department filters that I can use, but I can also filter by area and by development code or whatever else whatever else I need to actually go ahead and use. So I think there's enough information to actually get at least one entry for this development area of the $440. So now, very nicely, I'm getting income statements by other dimensions that I couldn't previously get at until I set up dimensions and until I set up analysis by dimensions. So again, that's one of the other great benefits of the analysis by dimension, is I now get to look at this data in account schedules, income statements, balance sheets, whatever it may be, whatever account schedules I've defined, I can look at that data now with any dimensions that I wanted to. Okay. So with that, I'm just checking my notes. I think I've come, oh, I did miss one other thing. There's GL budgets. If you wanted to, again, GL budgets, you can specify on them which dimensions are going to be applicable to that budget. So you can set up multiple budgets. So for example, if you have your operations budget, that one might be set up based on department and project. But development might have their own budget that they want to talk about in terms of what kind of programs that they're planning for the year and what kind of revenues that they want to bring in. Now that might not be part of the operations budget, which is really more expense oriented in terms of how much they will go pay for payroll, how much in vehicle expenses. But with this type of dimensioning and budgets, you can actually now set up budgets for other types of things. Now, I set up the area ahead of time because I thought this morning I was going to have people on here that were non-food banks, and that's a very common dimension that for-profit world would use if they're doing global or at least domestic sales across the country, that they'd want to know how their revenues are on a state-by-state basis or area-by-area basis. But this shows a good example in the food bank world, where you might want to develop and might want to say, listen, we're going to run these 22 events next year, and this is what I'm hoping to bring in revenue in these different ones. So you would go ahead and assign that dimension to that budget, and then you would go ahead and actually budget those amounts, and then you could do your comparison as long as the transactions that you post for those revenues are in fact tagged with the attribute for the particular event that they were applicable to. So I'm going to open it up for questions now, but go ahead. You can unmute yourselves if you were on mute and ask any questions you need to do or anything you want to see again.
Well, thank you, Rick. It was very helpful.